Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for listening to us. We talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. If you want to listen to that on the regular, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple or Spotify. If you go over there, make sure you rate, review, but most importantly, subscribe. If you do subscribe, you won't miss our shows when we drop them on Mondays. And speaking of Mondays, it is one right now at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, which means we're live on YouTube. And with that in mind, go over to the A to Z Sports Nashville YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell. If you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified when we go live. And you can come in here and be a part of the show. And something we're trying new this week is Twitter. At Big Orange Pod on Twitter. And we're going to see how that goes. See if we can draw on a few more folks from the old Elon Musk platform over there. So go follow us there too. I don't know. Probably a ton of you know me and Zach from Twitter. So many people. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at ADZ Sports, at Big Orange Pod. Go follow. A to Z Sports.com and all the other stuff. You know where to find us. Finally got my mic fixed after 2 weeks of my computer being dumb. It's so great to have the background music back. The Buffalo Killers for years now providing the background music of this great show. We appreciate them. What's up, Zach? How we doing?
I almost forgot what the intro music sounded like. Do you think they have any clue that they're the intro music for this random Tennessee podcast?
Absolutely not. And I don't even necessarily listen to the Buffalo Killers at large that much. They're a really small band. I don't even remember exactly where I heard this song. Probably committing some sort of copyright infringement on YouTube right now.
Oh, yeah.
But hey, that's all right. Great song. Great band. We appreciate them. Maybe someday they'll know what they mean to the Vols here. But all right. Let's get down to brass tacks. We, of course, are going to be talking about the weekend that Tennessee just had. We already got Kenny in the comments. He said, what a huge weekend. Go Vols. Aboriginal says GBO. GBO, because, man, what a weekend it was. Tennessee goes out and gets a commitment from David Sanders, the number one offensive tackle in America, one of the top players in the entire class of 2025. And that's great. But then you go and you steal a player from Alabama. Also, he commits. It was a heck of a weekend, and we are going to talk about every bit of it. And, I mean, you know what I'm about to say. We got to pay those bills first, folks. Let me tell you about Zen Sports, the new sports betting app in Tennessee. When you sign up for Zen Sports, you'll automatically earn up to a $100 no-danger first wager. And if your bet loses, you'll be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $100. But there's even more good news. Zen Sports has a one-of-a-kind VIP rewards program. If you qualify, you can earn comps at sporting events, concerts, you name it. There's even sportsbook bonuses. The VIP program is by invite only, so if you feel that your Zen Sports play might qualify, go to zensports.com/VIP. What are you waiting for? Zen Sports also offers true odds on all parlays, so get going and download their app, zensports.com. Zen Sports betting just got better. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. No danger. First wager limited to plus $500 to qualify. Boosted odds are derived from equivalent parlay bets offered in Tennessee. Must be 21 or older in Tennessee to bet. Zen Sports. Go download the app. All righty. The weekend started off extremely strong for Tennessee with the announcement from David Sanders. We've been waiting on this one. A lot of predictions coming in for David Sanders in the weeks leading up. Tennessee got one of his last couple of visits. He went to Nebraska, which they put on a good showing for David Sanders for sure. And then he came to Tennessee and had his final visit here before his commitment, which a lot of times that's always such a great sign for recruits. Then the predictions started rolling in from Steve Wiltfong and all of these recruiting guys that Sanders would probably choose Tennessee. Lo and behold, he does in a ceremony that I would describe as lengthy. He pretty much ran through the gambit. He thanked his siblings, his mother, God, his teachers, everyone in his coaches, everyone in his entire life system had to get credit for David Sanders and in his commitment. Hey, and the kid seems like a really great kid, but ultimately he chooses Tennessee. What'd you think of this one, Zach?
Yeah, it was definitely a lengthy commitment ceremony. I know it's a big day for those kids, so they deserve to take as much time as they want. But for those of us that just want to know, we're just sitting there on the edge, like, look, we've been waiting for, like you said, quite a while on this one, and I mean to close it out, it's pretty obvious over the last month that Tennessee was going to win this battle, but you never know until we've been hoodwinked before. We've seen some last second decisions not go Tennessee's way. But I mean, you're getting a great player, obviously, incredibly talented, future first round NFL draft pick type talent, hard worker. Steve Wiltfong was on with our friends Ramon, Kayla, and Will this morning. He's talking about how David Sanders played on both sides of the ball last season at Providence Day in Charlotte. Didn't have to do that as a 5-star recruit. He could say, I'm only going to play left tackle, and the coaching staff's probably going to say, okay, and let him do it. Played through a bum shoulder as well. So it kind of shows you that not only a talented kid, but a hard worker, great character, perfect fit for Tennessee. But the most impressive thing is how long this recruitment took. It was highly publicized. And it was almost like one by one, Tennessee had to go against some of the top programs, some of the top recruiting programs in college football from the last 5 to 10 years. Clemson, he grew up a Clemson fan. You had to go against Clemson. Georgia, Georgia's Georgia. They were in the mix early on. Ohio State, who is always, has a top recruiting class and is always a threat, it seems like, to players that Tennessee's going for. Then even South Carolina was in there a little bit. Nebraska coming up there towards the end. I mean, you had to go against all these just mammoth recruiting monsters, and they won. They won the battle, and that kind of shows you where Tennessee's at right now, recruiting wise. And when you can start winning those battles, we've said it for so long. That's what it takes to compete for a national championship. Is you have to win these battles against teams like Georgia and Ohio State and Georgia and Alabama's, all of that. And they are, and this is the biggest one yet for them, at least in this class.
For sure. And you don't want to speak too soon, but I think this is a sign of the times for Tennessee. This, especially if you can put together a couple of really good seasons with Nico, this could be the start of where you truly close that gap between yourself and Georgia, yourself and Alabama. Obviously, with Alabama and Saban leaving, it's a golden opportunity to catch up to them. You saw, if you were on Twitter, obviously this news hit the Bama message boards. They were completely beside themselves. And the take is kind of like, how is Tennessee doing this? How is this possible? They're spending more money. They're doing this. They're doing that. And the truth is, I think, is just the all-around effort right now at Tennessee is as good as it's been in God knows how long. And this isn't even necessarily in, taking into account the national championship for baseball and basketball, working, all that, like football alone, the effort that's been put in there, because there's just so many more moving pieces with football. And, no offense to baseball or basketball, but it's less dudes. It's not as big of a program. It's a bear to really get a handle on. And it just seems like from Josh Heupel on down, from Danny White on down, the effort that's being put into football right now, they're just hitting on all of the right buttons. And NIL is one of those where I think they are coming with the money. We all know Tennessee has the money. That's obvious. But we've talked about it in weeks past. It's not just about the money. That's not the entire thing. And especially when you look at a kid like David Sanders, who gets up, incredibly well spoken. It seems like he really considered everything and put a lot of thought into his recruiting process. Like, you're not just winning that kid with a fat paycheck. Everybody's going out and offering that kid a fat paycheck across the board. And something with Tennessee and what they're doing is clicking right now with kids. With that being said, this has to continue. This has to be paired with a good season this year. You can't fall off and show these kids that the product on the field isn't what it needs to be. But this is how it starts. You steal players that would have gone to Georgia. You steal players that would have gone to Alabama and Ohio State, and then you make the playoff and potentially compete for championships. This is where it begins, and that's really incredible. Now you add to the David Sanders situation the fact that Tennessee, I don't know which one I'm more impressed by. Obviously, the David Sanders, it was the long haul. You stuck by this kid. You put in your best effort recruiting, but you went out and you got Jaden Harmon, who, for those that don't know, has been committed to Alabama for quite a while, and you stole a player, flipped a player from Alabama. I mean, how many? I don't know if anybody keeps up with this stat. How many times has that ever happened? Especially since Saban has been there. Ever? Has that ever happened since Saban has been there? I would love to know, because that's a wild thing. And man, it's really impressive. And hopefully this is the start of truly closing that elite gap for Heupel and building the roster that they need to compete at that highest level.
Yeah, when it comes to the Sanders part and the NIL stuff, like the NIL obviously is a big factor in a lot of recruitments, but I think like Tennessee's not going out there and just trying to buy recruits. Georgia's not doing that. LSU's not doing that. We've heard Brian Kelly make comments. They're going to make sure these guys get paid, but they're not just trying to go out there and buy the recruits, because they know that if you can buy that player, it's probably not the one that you're going to count on, in the fourth quarter of a close game in November. It's just not a sustainable way to go about building your program. I think about NIL more with, Georgia Tech gets a 5-star recruit, last week. Indiana maybe, could flip a 5-star quarterback from USC. NIL is probably playing a little bit of a bigger factor in those battles. I think it's one of those things where programs, especially the top programs, are starting to understand. It's starting to get a little bit structured, I guess you'd say, when it comes to that NIL landscape, which is a good thing. I mean, that's kind of been the vision all along for how NIL is supposed to work. You get paid if you're played a high level. The better you are, the more notable you are, the more you get paid. Unless your name's Arch Manning and you get paid just for having that last name and that first name. But I think, Tennessee's working well within that landscape, and then this culture. I mean, it's no secret what they're doing. They're just doing it better than a lot of other programs right now. They're building a family-first atmosphere that's extremely competitive, that wants to win championships. They're just doing it the right way, and they have everything in place to do it the right way. They have the support from the school president, chancellor, Danny White, the athletic director, on down. So it's just everything's aligned. And that's the big secret. And they're just being consistent in the way that they go after these recruits. And that's why they didn't rocket to the top of the recruiting rankings 2 years ago by just buying as many players as they could. I think Josh Heupel knew that was not going to work, that this would eventually kind of self-correct in the NIL world. It wouldn't be the Wild West like we saw early on. I mean, there's still some of that, but we're starting to see it kind of come together and self-correct in a lot of ways. And credit Heupel and his staff for. It would have been real tempting when you're trying to flip this program from where it was when they took over. Would have been real tempting to take some shortcuts, and they really didn't. And then when it comes to the player that you flip from Alabama, I think the one really interesting thing there is that you've got a new position coach that came in, William Inge, that flipped that guy, Harmon, 4-star recruit. Tennessee flipped Inge from Alabama, if you remember. I mean, he was going to Alabama with Kalen DeBoer to be an assistant on that staff, and was like, "No, I'm gonna go to Tennessee instead." So I think that in itself was probably part of that recruiting pitch, maybe to Harmon. I'm obviously he knows that. He knows the story. He knows Inge's story. So that's a couple of wins that you've been able to get over Alabama this offseason. And as you said at the beginning, you've got to strike while the iron's hot there with Saban out of Tuscaloosa. Alabama is always going to have the potential to be a juggernaut in college football, but right now is the time where you can kind of pounce and step over them a little bit. You got to take advantage of it. It's why that game in Neyland this year is so important against them.
No doubt. Billy Jones says it starts with coaching, and we're a top 20 program now. You definitely are. And
oh yeah.
And it needs not to diminish anything that's happened, but to get to that national championship level, to get to the level of, say, Tennessee baseball right now in the landscape of college football, you have to get these elite dudes. That's what Tony Vitello is doing with that baseball team. He's just reloading and reloading and reloading and reloading, and you see it in the reactions from other fan bases. It's kind of that same thing that you got this week for Tennessee football, something you haven't seen for Tennessee football a ton in the last decade. How many opposing fans say about Tony Vitello's recruiting efforts? Like, how are they doing this? How do they have the number one recruiting class and they get this crazy set of transfer players? How are they doing this? That you have to have that for football. That's what I like. Everybody remember back when Kirby Smart showed up. I remember distinctly it's pre-NIL, distinctly thinking, how is this dude doing this? How are they getting every single 5-star player and every single 4-star player, and they're all going to Georgia, and he's freaking going, picking these dudes up in helicopters and dropping off bags of cash, Lord knows. That's the level that you have to get to. It is the beginning of and the end is these players and the dudes that you can put on the field. Add to that, Heupel's pretty good. I would say what we've seen so far, pretty good coaching, competent coaching. Has it been the absolute best it could be? He's still got some to work on the road, and obviously the defense and some things like that. But maybe the X factor there to take him over the top in terms of the coaching we've seen is the players. Maybe that's just what he needs. He just hasn't had the set of dudes. And I would bet that is it, especially on defense. I could 100% see that. So, yeah. And I mean, Chris says we need to steal a few more players just to piss them off. Yeah. This has to be the time where you take advantage. Because I think you have the chance to have a couple of really great seasons with Nico. And as you said, strike while the iron's hot. Now is the time, and it seems like they're doing it.
Yeah, and they might get another one from Bama, not flipping a commit, but we heard today that Ty Jackson, the top linebacker in the 2025 class, might visit Tennessee this fall. That was an Alabama, Florida State battle, kind of was the feeling there, and now Tennessee's getting involved. And if you're Alabama, or if you're an Alabama fan right now, you got to be like, are you serious? Tennessee's a threat. To a lot of the players that Alabama's going after, the players that Georgia's going after. Georgia's going to win their fair share. They're going to get more of those players than Tennessee gets, but Tennessee's starting to get a few of those. The Travis Smiths, the Mike Matthews, Jordan Ross out of Alabama's backyard. They're starting to rob some talent that in previous years we would see in Tuscaloosa, we would see in Athens. You'd see Tennessee going against these guys, and now they're wearing orange in those games. That is when you start to flip it. We've said for years about Kirby Smart, and it's not an insult to Kirby Smart, but he's not like the world's greatest X's and O's savant. And that's fine. You can be a really, really good head coach and not be that guy. There's all kinds of different approaches to being a head coach. And obviously Kirby knows defense, but some of the things they were doing on offense when Stetson Bennett was there, it wasn't this, Josh Heupel type offense or Jeff Levy or Lane Kiffin or Kendall Briles, whoever. It was just very straightforward. We have better players than you, and we're just going to run the pro style offense and beat you with it. They didn't have to do a lot of that stuff. And, Tennessee getting some of this elite talent with Heupel's unique, prolific offense that we know works in the SEC. We've seen it now for 3 years. It's really exciting to think about what they could accomplish. Everything is on the table, I think, for Tennessee to accomplish as soon as this year, if everything plays out. And that's not a prediction of how far Tennessee's going to go, but they're starting to get the pieces in place where it's like, if guys stay healthy, guys perform like we think they're capable of performing, yeah, this team can make a run for sure. Who knows how far they go, but they got the depth now to make some things happen. It's really fun time for Tennessee fans.
It really is, and it makes me nervous to think about, just because when was the last time you've been in a position like this? It's what was so nerve-wracking about that. I keep bringing up baseball. It's tough not to when you win a national title, but it's what made you so nervous in the College World Series, where you just went like, it's been so long since we've been here. You have to take advantage now. And I look right now at this recruiting class. I mean, this right now, where you're poised, is going to be the best recruiting class you've had since the Fulmer days. And that it just is what it is. You didn't have that elite level of recruiting. You have pretty good recruiting in all of that time in between, which makes it all the more embarrassing how bad some of those seasons were. The recruiting was never really that bad.
Yeah, if you have a top 25 class, you should be finishing in the top 25 every year in theory, right?
I mean, we were. I don't remember if it was us or another group of friends of mine where we have a group chat about UT, but we were talking about what Josh Heupel could have done with that 2015-2016 roster, where it was just Dobbs, Kamara, the wide receivers, like that entire.
So many of those dudes are still in the NFL.
Yes,
Dobbs, Kamara, Jennings, a lot of those guys are still playing.
I mean, they would have put up 1,000 yards a game, and as I said, it makes it all that much worse what ended up happening in those seasons. But this, as decent as some of those recruiting classes were, this could end up being the best that Tennessee's had in 20 years. And that's extremely exciting. And at the same time, it makes you nervous. Like, oh man, what an opportunity. It's the whole deal with Nico too. Him living up to the hype, you don't want to put too much pressure on that kid's shoulders, but what you hear is transcendent talent, generational talent. Like this could be the guy finally for Tennessee. And you start thinking like, we have to capitalize now, because now is the time. And it's as awesome as it is, it does build that pressure. Now that, okay, well, you got all of these dudes, you got your 5-star offensive lineman, 5-star quarterback, all of these guys. Let's see what can happen on the football field. And it's exciting, nerve-wracking all at the same time. I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be good.
I didn't think about it that way. I guess, are you more nervous like right now going into this season than maybe any other season, just because of what Tennessee could accomplish? Because like going into, I mean, when was the last time? Maybe 2016. Tennessee was getting some votes to maybe win the SEC East going into that season, and they started out 5-0, and we saw the way that it went after that. I feel like there's more expectations this year because Josh Heupel's went 11-2, right? Like he's proven that he can beat Alabama, he can beat LSU, he can beat Clemson, he can give Georgia a game in Athens. I know that game was easily won by Georgia, but it wasn't the blowout that Georgia fans would like you to think about. I mean, it was almost a one-possession game in the fourth quarter. I think if Jalen Wright scores late in that game, it was closer than the score looked, I thought. He's proven he can hang with these guys. He can win these games. And now you're going in with a team that's like, okay, you should beat Alabama. You should easily beat Florida. You should beat Oklahoma at Oklahoma. You should give Georgia a game in Athens. But what if you don't? What if you go 9-4? And what is that feeling then? It is kind of nerve-wracking in a way.
Yeah, I mean, this is really more of a conversation for next week, because obviously we're going to do our full season preview like we do every single year, and all that stuff
and everything about their offense and defense that
we're gonna dive deep into Chattanooga's depth chart. Make sure we tell you everything about every guy on that team. But really, this season, it almost feels like, specifically because of the defense, you're gonna have one of the better defensive lines in America this year, and you pair that with Nico, who the timing is almost not perfect on, because you wish you could pair the defensive line you're probably going to have this year with the potential secondary and Nico in his second year that you're going to have next year.
Yeah.
But you're going to lose the biggest pieces off that defensive line almost in their entirety this coming year. Some of the offensive line, it is going to be gone after this year. I mean, you're going to have to reload at some extremely important spots. I mean, the trenches, when it comes to playing big boy football, that's the foundation. That's where it all starts.
You got to develop some dudes this fall. You have to.
Do.
Like, it's imperative. Yeah. Both lines there.
And so it does make me nervous, because it almost feels like this season the expectations need to be a little bit higher, because you're going to have some very important turnover after this season, and
it's
again, go ahead.
It's going to be just an aside. There's going to be a very interesting portal period, transfer portal period after this season, seeing how Josh Heupel approaches that, because he'll have some holes to fill. I'm very intrigued to see how he goes about it this time around.
I am too. See, Caleb in the comments says, I'm absolutely terrified. Vol PTSD is real. Oh, it is so real.
But one thing though, you're talking about the pressure going into this year, or how there should be higher expectations and all this. The national media is kind of doing Tennessee a solid, because the attention isn't on them at all. I mean, it's like, yeah, they should be pretty good. They could be a dark horse. People like them. They like what they see, but it's Missouri, it's Ole Miss, it's Texas. I mean, if Texas doesn't make the playoff, that's a massive disaster. I mean, they got them penciled in already. It seems like it's yeah.
I mean, again, maybe a conversation for next week, or maybe because we probably aren't going to talk about Texas that much. It feels like Texas set to fail this season. Like,
I mean, yeah,
they're getting lifted up on a high pedestal, and you're talking about a team that did well in the Big 12. Like, the Big 12 is one thing, but they went and they lost to Washington. And again, I've said this a bunch. Like, that was a Washington team that, if we're being real here, would have gone like 9-3 in the SEC last year. No offense to them. No offense. I like Michael Penix Jr., really exciting player. They were a cool team. They would have gone like 9-3 in the SEC last year.
And they beat a Alabama team early in the season that was, transitioning away from Bryce Young, who was one of the better Alabama quarterbacks we've seen. It was just nothing against Texas. They might be great. I don't know. I haven't done a deep dive into Texas and what I expect from them. You got to go play the games and see what happens. But it's just the way that they're kind of penciled in, along with Alabama in a lot of senses. And like I said, Missouri and Ole Miss, if those teams don't make the playoff, or they're not right there on the cusp, it's a massive letdown year. Whereas in the eyes of the media, if Tennessee comes up just short of the playoff, yeah, we'd all be disappointed, because we think this is a playoff team that's very capable of making the playoffs, barring any sort of major injuries. I think they'll get a bit of a pass if they go 10-3 this year, with that 10th win being in a bowl game.
Billy says, my goal is to make the playoffs. Same. And I don't know. I'll have to collect my thoughts up on that. Like, what a quote unquote successful season would be this year. Because you're in sort of just this weird spot where you're not sure exactly how good Nico is going to be. You have some really powerful weapons, especially on that defensive line. And you're thinking it's almost not a rebuilding year, but kind of a building year. But in reality, you're actually losing a lot of guys after the season. There's a lot to unpack there. That's going to be next week's show. But before we move on to talking about the depth chart for this season, and potentially some of the breakout players for Tennessee this year, is there anything else with recruiting, Zach, that you want to touch on?
Yeah, it does look like Tennessee's going to get another 4-star cornerback, kid from South Carolina. He's actually from France originally. Do you have his name?
Conan Banny. Conan Banny.
Yeah, he I say 4-star recruit. Seems pretty safe to say that he's going to commit to Tennessee. Again, you never know until they actually do. I think he commits August 23rd, maybe.
I was looking for his timeline here. Well, I can't.
That's another nice defensive recruit. That, I mean, you think about all the offense and stuff. Tennessee's doing a really good job on the defensive side of the ball when it comes to recruiting as well, which is, you got to recruit both sides at an elite level to win championships. And I think the misconception about Josh Heupel is that he was all offense and didn't really care about the defense. And I think Tim Banks he runs the show on that side of the ball, but Heupel's involved and he knows what a good defense needs. I mean, he's a competitive guy. He wants those guys to be dangerous and to be feared. I mean, he said it before, the standard at Tennessee is to play elite defense. So it's not something where he's just hoping to outscore guys. It
is August 23rd, this Saturday.
Okay.
Finally found it on 247 there. Kyle says this Saturday. Thanks, Kyle. And Jason says, I saw that the number 1 linebacker in 25 class wants to visit Tennessee. Zach mentioned that just a second ago. Hopefully everything continues to come together for that recruiting class. It's looking like definitely top 10, maybe even top 5. They can close out super strong.
Number 6 right now, but it's so, I mean, those rankings are so volatile from day to day, depending on other programs and what happens there.
Just keep stealing players from Alabama and then just overtake them. That's what I would like. Lou Man back again, our resident Vandy fan. He says Vanderbilt and Western Kentucky will make the playoffs.
No, former Tennessee offensive coordinator Tyson Helton's still up there at Western Kentucky, I think.
Maybe my wife, Western Kentucky alum, she'll be cheering hard for them. Yeah, we'll see there, Lou Man. Okay, so obviously the season is right around the corner, and I mean it is what how many days?
12
days. Right there. You got actual football this week, which that's so exciting. On Saturday, you got some of those starter games. One is it in Ireland? It's Florida State and Georgia Tech, I think, is in Ireland. And then you got some Thursday games. Colorado heading for its comeuppance against North Dakota State, I think, is on that coming
Wouldn't
Thursday.
that be something? I mean, that's one you could see. You could see an upset there.
100% you could see. I mean, North Dakota State, perennial FCS power. Yeah, absolutely. That's upset alert over there. But with that being said, we got to talk about Tennessee's actual roster. We have some, but I wanted to ask you, Zach, who is a potential kind of breakout player on offense and defense for Tennessee coming up? And we'll talk about that right after I tell you about the great folks at Farm Bureau Health Plans. Farm Bureau has been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years. Much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200 plus locations across the state of Tennessee. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau Health Plans. Huge thank you to them. Couldn't do it without them. All right, so I have it in the YouTube title. We were going to talk about the depth chart, and that sort of is true. The depth chart, as it always has been with Josh Heupel, it's not set in stone. There's a lot of ors on that depth chart. Could be this guy or this guy or this guy or this guy. This guy's cousin, maybe. This guy's, father-in-law. Who knows? And so we're not sure exactly what it's going to be, but I will ask you this, Zach. First, offense, then we'll talk about defense. The breakout player for Tennessee that would be akin to a Hendon Hooker, where the season started out, you didn't know his name. He wasn't even the starter. And I'm not saying it has to be a guy who's not going to be a starter, but just, a guy who is not on everybody's radar from this depth chart, but maybe by the end of the season, we're saying this dude changed everything for this offense, changed everything for this defense. But like I said, start with the offense. Do you have anybody in mind there?
Yeah, I think this is tough because Tennessee fans are so passionate. They know the depth chart 3-4 guys down. So it's really hard to surprise Tennessee fans. But there's a few names on offense. I think the first name that would jump out to most people that could just have a monster year is Chris Brazzell, the Tulane transfer wide receiver. Heard really good things about him in camp. Really competitive guy. Kind of has that Jawan Jennings dog mentality. He just wants to go out there and win games. Like, that's his focus. Did we win? Big guy, 6'5", seems to understand the offense pretty well so far. Could have a big year from him. I think another wide receiver that's being overlooked a little bit, though, sounds like he's probably going to play quite a bit, is Chaz Nimrod. Had a really good offseason. He could be one that steps up. And I think the one that's kind of flying under the radar that's kind of getting a little bit of hype the last couple of weeks is Deshaun Bishop at running back, I think he is a walk-on. I know we discussed that before. I'm pretty sure he is, unless something's changed there. You don't know what that rotation is going to look like behind Dylan Sampson. Cam Seldon and Peyton Lewis are in the mix, but it seems like Josh Heupel really likes Deshaun Bishop. And one thing he said last week that stuck out to me is that he talked about Deshaun Bishop being really good in pass protection. And we know that's something that you have to be able to do to get on the field in this Tennessee offense. Because if you're not running the ball, you got to be back there blocking because everything's so spread out. You got to help protect the quarterback. We saw Dylan Sampson struggle with pass protection a little bit during his freshman season. I remember in Baton Rouge, he got blown up a couple times, got Hendon Hooker hit, didn't play quite as much, right after that. It's a tough thing. It's usually what takes the longest for running backs to pick up is how to pass protect. It's a lot more complex than you think. think the fact that he can pass protect the way that he can, and that he's been standing out uh, during fall camp, maybe he could be like Dylan Sampson was, where it's like, hey, this guy's a lot better than we realized.
Yeah.
He's one that I would definitely keep an eye on.
Interesting notes from Jason and Derek in the comments. Heupel saying that Cam Seldon is full go in practice right now.
Heupel's answer on that, though, was very Heupel light. I saw some of the tweets that talked about it, but then at the very end of the press conference, I think a reporter asked him, he said, so you're saying he did use the word full go, I think, but then a reporter said, so you're saying Seldon's been cleared for contact? And I think Heupel said something like, yeah, he's been out there with us. Yes, sir. It's still like like he just can't help it. So it sounds like he's trending in the right direction, with the caveat that, yeah, we'll see how comfortable they are with him. Even if he is a full go, I would imagine they'll still be cautious, because you want Cam Seldon in November. You know, it's not maybe pivotal to have him against Chattanooga in the opener or some of these other early season games.
If you can get him for NC State, that would be awesome. Just to have that added depth there. Yeah. Seems like he's going to be a pretty athletic dude. That would be huge. That is really funny. Heupel's response there, though. He's been out there with us. Yeah. He's cleared. Man.
You've seen him, right? You've seen photos.
Yeah.
He's a Vol.
He's cleared to be on the practice field. Yeah, he correct. Oh God, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, I agree with those. I like that. It's so tough to say exactly who it might be, because especially like a wide receiver right now, you genuinely don't know who all is going to be there. You have really heard that buzz about Brazel. You hope Brew McCoy is that guy. You hope Dante Thornton. I mean, I kind of have that feeling about Dante Thornton a little bit. Like,
well, he was hitting his stride right for that injury against Missouri.
Yeah, he was starting to look the best that he had before that injury, and maybe he's put in a good offseason of hard work. And you want to say a guy like Mike Matthews, who is uber talented, but historically with Heupel, young guys don't really see the field very much, and so you don't know if he'll ever even be around. You've heard things like Miles Kitselman sort of coming out of nowhere, transfer from Alabama, who we thought was really just going to be a depth piece. You've heard he might have a chance to get more playing time this year. You never really know. And I mean, Nico's the obvious answer here, but I feel like Nico's not even an answer there on the offense. That's a total cop out. I mean, of course, Nico could be that guy.
Are you talking about tight ends there? Ethan Davis is the could be the real X factor. And,
absolutely.
Heupel, I think it was last week, he made this comment that kind of flew under the radar about the tight ends, and he's like kind of just where they were with recruiting in that room. He didn't slam the guys they had before, but you could tell in his voice, like, no offense to these guys, they were good players for Tennessee, but Jacob Warren, Princeton Fant, they're not, George Kittle out there. They're not future Travis Kelce's or Brock Bowers. They were good players that played within the system in Tennessee, and they're getting a chance in the NFL to stick on a roster, but they're not, they're kind of role players. What about, what happens when this offense gets one of those guys? Because they're out there, you keep chipping away on the recruiting trail, you're bound to get one. What if that is Ethan Davis? What if it's Holden Stays or Kitselman? Man, how does that change this offense then, especially in the red zone where Tennessee struggled so much last season? That could be a real game changer. Maybe one of those guys is one that kind of comes up out of nowhere. It's like, whoa, Tennessee's got this stud tight end all of a sudden that can't be covered. And that would be nice.
Man, that would be sweet. But obviously where you probably really need it the most is probably not just defense, but the defensive backfield. And I'll throw this one to you, Zach. On defense, are you feeling anybody as a breakout? Obviously, kind of like Nico. We can take James Pierce off the board there. He's literally projected to be the number 1 overall pick in some places in this upcoming NFL draft. But anybody on defense standing out, you think?
Yeah, I think, whoever plays opposite James Pierce is going to have a ton of opportunities. Really everyone on that defensive line, because Pierce is bound to get some extra attention. Joshua Josephs is a guy that kind of sounds like he had that Jalen Hyatt aha moment where he straight up said he was kind of jealous of, and not in a bad way, but he was envious, I guess, of what James Pierce accomplished last season. So he's put in extra work. He's energized. You heard it in the press conference that he had with reporters earlier this month. He's just excited about Tennessee's defensive line. He's going to have a ton of opportunities. Caleb Herring may be there as well. He's going to have a ton of opportunities to rack up some sacks this season. You really need a guy to emerge opposite Pierce, because if they're going to double team Pierce, you got to have somebody else that's dangerous on the other side that can really wreak some havoc there. And then, I think Arian Carter, does he take that next step at linebacker? He's super athletic, one of the most athletic players on the team. Could be a future NFL player. I think he has that kind of talent. If he really starts to grasp the linebacker position, that would be huge for Tennessee. The secondary, it's going to be tough to, it's all these guys are new and we haven't really seen them. We just kind of heard things. I think Boo Carter is the one that everybody's excited about. I think Christian Harrison could be an interesting one there that's going to be splitting time with Boo Carter. And Heupel, I thought it was pretty encouraging today. He said, Harrison and Carter are both going to play a lot of football for Tennessee. I think there's been this fear in the Tennessee fan base where they don't play young guys. Are they going to hold Boo Carter back? Is he barely going to see the field? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they know what they got there. As long as he can play within the system, I think he's probably going to see quite a bit of time. But don't sleep on Christian Harrison. That guy's got an NFL bloodline. His dad won a couple Super Bowls with the Patriots. He could be one that kind of shows up out of nowhere. It's like, oh yeah, this guy, he hits hard. He's kind of always where he needs to be. Wouldn't be a surprise if he ends up being a big contributor, I think.
Surely at a certain point with Boo Carter, that pure talent just takes over in terms of the whole, will they play the older guys? Will they play the talent? I would hope that you can just come to your senses there and say, this is the best dude. And if that's Christian Harrison, fair enough. That's great. But Boo Carter, when you just look at raw talent, like some of the stuff that guy has shown, and granted, it's in high school tape, it's in practice tape, it's not in an SEC football game. But hopefully they will make that executive decision to override whatever policy they may or may not have there. I
think it's more just
the best guys.
I know that it's kind of framed as this veteran versus young guy thing, but I really think it's just understanding of the system. I think that's really important to Tim Banks and Willie Martinez. And with Boo Carter, he comes from a defense that he has said was similar to what Tennessee runs, a lot of similar concepts. So it's not like he's stepping into something that's completely foreign. Obviously, it's going to be way more complex at the SEC level than what you see in high school. But he at least has an idea, of what Banks and Martinez want to do, and he's been with the program 8-9 months now, so he should have a good enough grasp, I think, to play some pretty important snaps and let his athleticism take over. And who knows? Maybe you see him on offense some too. I know that was going around at some point too that he might see some snaps on offense. Get your playmakers on the field. If he's that dynamic, he can return kicks and do all that. Find a way to use him to score some points if you have to.
Let the players play.
Yeah.
We've had that talking point a lot with Rick Barnes, where he's had some explosive players on the roster, and it's kind of felt like he's forced them into a system and not just let them be, the uber talented dudes that they are.
That's the Dean Smith influence on Rick Barnes. That's like, that's somebody that's he was close with back in the ACC days, kind of. So.
Well, don't let the my way or the highway get in the way of playing some dudes that are monsters, because that, man, I just hate sometimes you can see the potential in guys. You go, oh my gosh, there it is, and then they don't really get their opportunity to
like
the extent that they
Josh
could.
Dobbs in his first 2 years at Tennessee, and it was clear as a true freshman that he was the guy, and then Justin Worley started.
Justin Worley, dude.
Season. It's like, this is the guy, because he didn't practice well. And I remember I was at a lot of those early Dobbs practices. I remember being at practices when he was a true freshman, and he was the worst looking quarterback of all of them at those practices. That's when Riley Ferguson was still on the team, and you had Nate Peterman and Worley, and Dobbs did look the worst in those practices. But you put him on the field, and he makes plays.
He's a PTPer, primetime player, baby.
Saw it last night with the 49ers.
Yep, he's putting on a heck of a preseason right now. If he could just translate it, not just into the season, he's translated into an NFL season some, but consistently This last year, he flashed and then kind of fell off. But regardless, I think there's tons of potential here. I think the one that I'm probably rooting for the most, probably because me and him are about the same age, is Keenan Peely. He might be older than me, actually. I don't know. But I just hope that he can get in that high pressure spot. I mean, you are sort of the everybody calls it the quarterback of the defense or whatever. And you gotta be on top of your game. And he showed signs last year in the little bit that he did play. But I hope that he comes through and can really be a difference maker. As you said, Aaron Carter is another one that I thought he showed real potential last year, but at times looked lost out there. And hey, you got a off season to work through that now. You're older, stronger. And I'd love to see that. And with the defensive backs, I want it to be Boo Carter just for the storyline there. But I mean, anybody, please.
Yeah, you need a couple of those cornerbacks. Ricky Gibson, somebody. They gotta step up for sure.
Yeah, I don't care who it is. Will Brooks. It's anybody. Come on down and play well at that defensive back spot because we need you to do that.
I think Peely can help a lot in coverage too. I think that was the one thing, even though he only played that one game against Virginia last season, and it was Virginia, so it wasn't a elite opponent, but you saw a couple flashes that he really understands pass coverage as a linebacker, and that's something that has just killed this Tennessee team for forever, it seems like. I mean, who was the last linebacker that was just a really good coverage linebacker for them? Kirkland, maybe? In the Butch Jones days, He was pretty good. And when he got hurt, that's when that Tennessee team really kind of fell off under Butch. But you've seen, even Henry Toto, who's in the NFL now, struggled terribly in pass coverage. Jeremy Bates was brutal in pass coverage. They just haven't really had those guys that can kind of be out there in the middle of the field and take that away from teams. And if Peely can be that guy, that's just another step forward for this defense, and it helps everything else out too. It helps the secondary, it helps the defensive line. It's all, to borrow a Butch term, it's complementary football, but that's what you have to have.
You do. That, as annoying as the Butchisms are,
yeah,
that is real. I did go back and look. He was class of 2016, Keenan Peely.
Like 4 presidents ago and 2 pandemics ago, and
Barack Obama was still president.
Yeah, it was a while.
Oh man, that is funny. All right, I think that's the bulk of it. Anything else with football, Zach, that you want to cover before we bounce out of here?
No, let's just keep everybody healthy these last week and a half, 2 weeks before you get to game day on August 31st, which is going to be a scorcher, I'm sure, in Neyland because it's like a 12:45 game. That's going to be awful, I think, if you're there. Just I've been there at those games. They're rough, especially this time of year. Maybe they'll get lucky and it won't be too hot.
I was looking at the weather today at like the 10-day whatever forecast. And it is supposed to be unbelievable weather for this week, like high of 85, low of 60, just as beautiful as it can get, football weather. And then I saw the middle of next week, it's like 92, 93, 94. It's
going to be brutal.
Yeah.
But at least it's Chattanooga. You're not opening against a, tough Power 5 opponent like some teams do. Be really nice to go out there, get Nico some work, and get Gaston Moore and Jake Mertlinker in the game, get them some action. They need it. You need those backup quarterback reps. Really everything. That could be a great development opportunity for the entire program, especially we've talked about the offensive line where you've really got to develop some depth behind these starters. I think your starters are really good. The left guard sounds like it's coming along. I don't know if Andres Carriage maybe will be the guy there. Lampley, Heupel was non-committal today, but if that's your only big question mark, I think your starting 5's pretty good. What do you have behind that? That's what they got to go figure out, and that Chattanooga game can be beneficial there.
Yeah, hopefully a nice little warm up there. Treat it like the practice that it should be. Well, don't treat it like a practice. It is a football game. Don't go out there and screw around.
Yeah, but it is basically your version of a preseason game in some sense.
Yeah, and hopefully they can figure it out because that in NC State. I mean, we're going to talk about this next week. That NC State game, you watch out.
Yeah, don't sleep on them.
No.
but I think you're getting them in a good time of year. They got a lot of transfer players that are kind of, their quarterback. He's figuring things out early in the year.
Yep.
Maybe that works to your advantage. We'll see.
We shall see. And we're going to talk about that next week. So excited. It's season. It is almost football season. We are right here. So close. You can taste it right now, man. I mean, next week, it's going to be full season preview. It's going to be preview of the
game week.
Game. Yeah. I mean, it is. We are right on top of it, folks. Exciting times. What a time to be alive. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan. Thank you to everybody for watching. It means the world. Everybody for coming in and commenting. Lou Man, Billy, Nugs, Derek, Jason. We got Caleb, Chris, Aboriginal, Kenny, everybody in here for commenting. Could not do it without you. Yeah, tune in. And also, as I said last week, stay tuned for some exciting news coming up. Hopefully, we got to get all the plans and everything in place before we have anything to tell you. But some exciting news for the channel and for this show coming up. And we'll tell you all about it when we can. So thanks again for watching. And we will talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.